Have you ever noticed that every time you decide you're finally going to get healthy, you immediately go into research mode? You open YouTube, you Google the best workout split, you search for high protein recipes, you compare meal plans, you start listening to podcasts, you save Instagram reels, you buy a new food scale, maybe even a new little water bottle, maybe a new journal, because this is finally going to be the time you stay consistent. And for a little while, it actually feels like you're making, progress. Like you're getting your life together. Like this time is gonna be different. But then Tuesday comes, or Thursday, or next Monday, and somehow your life looks exactly the same, only with a new water bottle. Can I challenge you for a second? And don't answer this with what you wish were true. Answer it honestly. How many fitness videos have you watched this month? How many podcasts? How many workout plans have you saved? How many times have you thought, okay, Monday, I'm starting strong? Now here's the uncomfortable question. How much has your life actually changed? Not your intentions, not your knowledge, your actual life. Because I think if we're honest, there's often a pretty big gap between the two. A gap between what we know and what we actually do. And before you think I'm judging you, I'm not. I've done this too. I've gone down the rabbit hole. I've watched hours of videos. I've read the books. I've searched the perfect workout. I've planned out the perfect week. Because here's the thing, research feels productive. Planning feels productive. Making the grocery list feels productive. Buying a meal prep containers feels productive. Watching 3 hours of fitness videos kind of feels like you've accomplished something, doesn't it? You close your laptop thinking, okay, I think I finally figured it out. But if we're being honest, nothing in your actual life has changed. And here's something I've noticed after coaching people for 10 years. Honestly, it surprised me. The people who struggle the most usually aren't the people who know the least. They're often the people who know the most. They know they should eat more protein. They know strength training builds muscle. They know walking is good for them. They know sleep matters. They know consistency beats perfection, and they know. So here's a question that's been bouncing around in my head for a long time. If knowledge is the answer, why are so many knowledgeable people still stuck? I don't think most people have a knowledge problem anymore. I think they're missing a step. And here's the crazy part. I don't think anyone ever taught us that this step even exists. Every workout program you've ever downloaded, every meal plan, every habit tracker, every morning routine quietly assumes you've already become a different person. So let's unpack that, because I know this sounds like a strange little statement. Every plan assumes you've already become a different person. What do I mean by that? Well, think about the last workout program you downloaded. Did it tell you what exercises to do? Probably. Did it tell you how many sets and reps? Yeah, probably. Maybe even told you exactly what days to go to the gym, what to do. But here's what it didn't tell you. How to become the kind of person who actually goes to the gym on the days you said you would. Think about a meal plan. It tells you what to buy, what to cook, what ingredients, how much to eat, but it quietly assumes you're already the kind of person who meal preps on Sunday, packs your lunch before work, and doesn't order takeout when, you're exhausted on Wednesday night. Or think about a morning routine. Wake up, drink water, meditate, journal, go for a walk. Sounds great, right? But what if right now, you're someone who hits snooze 3 times every morning? The routine isn't wrong. It's just written for someone else. And I think this is where so many people get frustrated because, then they blame themselves. They say, I have no discipline. I just can't stay consistent. I always quit. But what if that's not actually the problem? What if the problem isn't that the plan is too hard? It's that the plan skipped the hardest part, the part where you have to change. Here's what I mean. Imagine I handed you a daily routine of an Olympic athlete. Would it work? Well, technically, yeah. If you followed it exactly, you'd probably become fitter and stronger. But almost none of us could actually follow it. Not because we're lazy, because we're not living as the same person. We don't have the same routines, the same priorities, the same habits, the same beliefs, the same desires, the same expectations of ourselves. The plan makes perfect sense for the person it's written for. And I think we accidentally do this to ourselves all the time. We find someone who's successful. We copy what they eat, how they train, how they organize their day, how they wake up, how they think. And then we're shocked when we can't stick with it. Again, not because the plan is bad, but because we're trying to borrow someone else's behavior before we built the foundation that makes those behaviors feel normal. I think that's the hidden step. Not finding a better workout, not finding a better diet, not finding better motivation, but becoming the kind of person those plans were written for. And this is where I think people start getting really uncomfortable, because it's a lot easier to download a new program than it is to admit that maybe the biggest thing that needs to change isn't the program, it's us. Now, before this starts sounding all discouraging, I actually think it's incredibly freeing. Because if the problem isn't that you're lazy or broken or lacking willpower, then maybe you've been trying to solve the wrong problem this whole time. And that brings us to what I think is the real missing piece. You ready? Identity. So let me ask you another question. Have you ever caught yourself saying something like, I've just never been disciplined, or I've just always struggled with food. I'm just not a morning person. I have no willpower. I've never been athletic. I always fall off. That's just the way my brain works. I'm not that kind of person. That's just who I am. Maybe you've even laughed about it, like it's simply a fact about you. Here's what I find fascinating. Most of us say those things like they're facts, not opinions, not stories, facts, like they can't change. And once something becomes a fact in our minds, well, we stop questioning it. We stop challenging it. We stop asking, is this actually true? Instead, our brain quietly shifts into a different job. It starts looking for evidence that the story is true. Think about what happens when someone believes they're bad with food. They have one night where they overeat. Immediately they think, see, I knew it. Not, I had one rough night. Not, I've been stressed this week. And not, tomorrow's a new day. It's, this is who I am. Or maybe someone tells themselves, I'm just inconsistent. They miss 2 workouts because work gets busy. Instead of thinking, well, life got in the way this week. They think, there I go again. You see what's happening here? The behavior isn't just a behavior anymore. It's becoming evidence. Evidence that supports the story they've been telling themselves all along. And I think this is something almost all of us do, not just with health, but with everything. Maybe you've convinced yourself you're awkward, so every slightly uncomfortable conversation becomes proof. Maybe you've convinced yourself you're just bad with money, so every unexpected expense becomes proof. Maybe you've convinced yourself you're disorganized, so every forgotten appointment becomes proof. It's almost like your brain becomes a detective, looking for clues that confirm what it already believes. Psychologists actually have a name for this that you've probably heard. It's called confirmation bias. We naturally notice and remember the evidence that supports what we already believe, while often overlooking the evidence that challenges it. And when it comes to our own identity, that bias can become incredibly powerful because our brain likes consistency, likes predictability. If you spent years believing I'm the kind of person who always quits, okay, your brain starts treating every setback as confirmation, even when it's not. Now here's the part that completely changed how I think about behavior change. I don't think your brain is trying to keep you unhealthy. No. I think it's just trying to keep your story consistent. That's kind of its job, survival. That's a really important distinction though, because your brain values certainty. It likes knowing who you are, even if the story isn't serving you, because certainty feels safer than uncertainty. Think about it. If you spent 10 years believing I'm not someone who works out, then walking into a gym isn't just physically uncomfortable, it's psychologically uncomfortable. You're doing something that doesn't match the story you've been carrying around. And whenever our actions and our identity don't line up, yeah, our brain notices. That's why the beginning of change always feels awkward. Not because you're failing, not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're asking your brain to consider an entirely new story. And that's why I don't think lasting change starts with finding a better plan. It starts with recognizing the story you've been unconsciously trying to prove. Because once you can see the story, you finally have the opportunity to start writing a different one. Okay, great. So if that's the problem, how do we actually change the story? Because I think this is where people get stuck. They hear someone say, you just need to change your identity. And they think, great, how? Do I just wake up tomorrow and decide, you know what, you're disciplined? Do I suddenly convince myself, you know what, I'm a healthy person? Do I repeat affirmations in the mirror until I finally believe them? No, I don't think that's how it works. You wouldn't believe it. Because if you spent the last 10 years believing I'm inconsistent, your brain isn't gonna believe the opposite overnight. It's a little too smart for that. Honestly, I don't think it should. Because your brain isn't looking for positive thinking, it's looking for evidence. I mean, think about it. If I walked up to you and said, I'm an incredible piano player, but then I sat down at the piano, couldn't play a single note, well, you wouldn't believe me, and you would be right not to. Not because you're negative, because you've seen the evidence. Now imagine I practiced every day, for months, for years. Eventually, you wouldn't need me to tell you I was a piano player. The evidence would speak for itself. I think our brains work the exact same way. We don't believe something because we say it, because it's more positive or full of self-love. We believe something because we've experienced it enough times that it starts to feel true. And this is where I think people have been approaching habits backwards. They're waiting to feel like a healthy person. If I just put the habits in, I'll feel healthy, before they act like one. But I think it works in the opposite direction. You act before you believe. You collect evidence before your identity changes. Every action you take is a vote. Every workout is a vote. Every balanced meal is a vote. Every evening walk is a vote. Every time you go to bed instead of scrolling for another hour is another vote. Not a transformation, a vote. Because one vote doesn't decide an election. Neither does one bad vote. One missed workout doesn't suddenly mean you're lazy. One weekend of overeating doesn't suddenly erase months of progress. One vacation doesn't make you unhealthy. Identity isn't built by individual moments. It's built by patterns. I had a client once who told me I'm just someone who never can stay consistent. Not angrily, she was just matter of fact. It's like she was telling me the color of her eyes. And instead of trying to convince her she was wrong, because what good would that do? We made one tiny change. I told her, I don't need you to become a consistent person this month. I just need you to start collecting some evidence. So instead of chasing perfection, we celebrated every single promise she kept for herself. Every vote, one workout, evidence. One planned lunch, evidence. One evening walk, evidence. One decision to stop eating when she was comfortably full, evidence. Slowly, something interesting happened. She stopped saying, I'm trying to become consistent, and started saying, I think I'm actually becoming someone who follows through. Nothing magical happened. She simply had enough evidence that the old story stopped making sense. I think that's how identity changes. Not in one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of tiny moments that slowly become impossible to ignore. Because eventually your brain looks at all that evidence and says, yeah, maybe I'm not the person I thought I was. And I think that's one of the most powerful moments in behavior change, in life. I think there's one more reason this is difficult. And honestly, I don't think this is your fault. I think it's human nature. We all struggle with it. But if I told you, I can help you completely transform your life in the next 30 days. That sounds exciting, right? Feels motivating, gives you something dramatic to chase, puts an end date to it. But if I told you, today, I just want you to collect one small piece of evidence. Yeah, that doesn't sound nearly as exciting, does it? It almost feels too simple, too slow, too ordinary, not Instagram worthy. And I think that's part of the reason why so many people struggle with the idea. Because we are wired to look for transformation, not gradual identity shifts. We want the before and after picture, the dramatic reveal, the moment where everything changes. But I don't actually think that's how lasting change happens. And we have to admit that. I think we've just become really good at noticing the finish line and completely overlooking everything that got someone there. Think about the people in your life who seem effortlessly healthy. The ones who go for walks, cook their dinner, go to the gym, drink the water, get enough sleep. It's easy to look at them and think, they're just so disciplined. That's just who they are. But you're only seeing the finished product. You're not seeing the hundreds or thousands of ordinary decisions that came before it. The nights they chose to go to bed, the mornings they got up anyway, the workouts they almost skipped, the grocery trips, the walks, the packed lunches, the tiny promises they kept to themselves when no one was looking. Those moments don't make for exciting transformation videos, but they're the moments that actually change a person. I think that's why so much fitness advice feels incomplete. It gives you a list of behaviors without explaining how those behaviors slowly become part of who you are. It promises you transformation, but it completely skips over identity. Here's something else. I wonder if one of the reasons we hold so tightly to these stories about ourselves is because they're strangely comfortable. Think about how often we say things like, "I've just always been that way. I'm just bad with sticking with things. That's just how my brain works. I've never been a morning person." Those statements feel honest, but they also feel safe. Because if that's simply who you are, then nobody can challenge it. Not your coach, not your spouse, not your friends, not even you. The story protects itself. Because if you've decided this is just who I am, then you never have to ask a much scarier question. What if that's not actually true? Because if it's not true, then change becomes possible, but it also becomes your responsibility. And that's uncomfortable because now you can't hide behind the story anymore. Now you have to go collect the evidence, one choice at a time, one promise at a time, one vote at a time. I actually think that's where real transformation begins. Not when you find the perfect workout, not when you finally feel motivated, not when Monday comes, but the moment you're willing to loosen your grip on the story you've been carrying around and become curious enough to ask, maybe that isn't who I am. Maybe that's just who I've practiced being. And I think those are two very different things. Because if you've practiced becoming one version of yourself, you can practice becoming another. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, got it. I understand why I've been stuck. Now what? Here's where I would start. Not with a new workout, not a new plan, not a new list of things to do, not another fitness video. I'd start by getting really honest with myself. I'd ask, what's the story I keep telling about myself? Not the story you tell other people, the one you tell yourself. Maybe it's, I'm not consistent. I always quit. There's reasons why I can't do it. I have no self-control. I've never been athletic. I'm just not a morning person. That's just how my brain works. Whatever it is, write it down. Because you can't change a story you haven't acknowledged. And then I would just ask one simple question. Is that actually a fact? Or is it a story I've repeated so many times that it started feeling like one? Those are two very different things because facts don't change, stories can. Now here's where most people make a mistake. They think the next step is replacing that story with a new one. I am disciplined, I am healthy, I am consistent. Yeah, maybe someday, but not today. Because I don't want you pretending. I want you collecting evidence. Instead, ask yourself one question. Not, what would a perfect version of me do? That's overwhelming, so you're not gonna do it. Ask, what would someone who values their health do next? Not next month, not next year, not forever, just next. Maybe I'd drink a glass of water. Maybe I'd go for a 10-minute walk. Maybe I'd put some protein on my plate. Maybe I'd go to bed 30 minutes earlier. Maybe I'd simply keep the promise I made to myself today. One decision, one vote. And then tomorrow, do it again. It's gonna feel messy. That's part of it. Because here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to leave this video trying to become a completely different person by Monday. Ironically, that's the exact trap we've been talking about this whole time. You're not trying to transform overnight. You're trying to become one vote more believable than yesterday. That is it. Imagine if every single day you collected just one piece of evidence, one workout, one walk, one healthy breakfast, one night where you went to bed when you said you would, one moment where you followed through, not perfectly, but consistently. You know what happens after a week? You have 7 votes. After a month, you got around 30. After a year, hundreds. At some point, the evidence becomes stronger than the old story. And eventually, even your brain has to admit something. Yeah, maybe I'm not the person I thought I was. And that's the moment people often describe as transformation. But it wasn't really transformation. It was the natural result of hundreds of tiny decisions that finally became impossible to ignore. So maybe stop asking yourself, how do I completely change my life? And start asking, what's one piece of evidence I can give myself today? Because I have a feeling that question will change your life far more than another perfectly designed workout program ever will. If you close this video and immediately start searching for another one, guess what? you'll have proven the exact point we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes. Instead, close YouTube. Give yourself one piece of evidence today, then come back tomorrow. And then I'll see you in the next one.